I want to know how we can have that good problem of getting that desire to say, hey, what's going on in this school, or what's going on in Emily's classroom, what's going on in Sarah's classroom, what's going on in Nikki Sarvato's classroom, right? Because there are other teachers as well. What we're going to see with Mr. Valtekis's science research classroom when we get the furniture in. I want that too. So that's where we want to be. But what I want to spend time on now is really kind of talking a little bit about, first, one of my questions, asking our experts here. How is your classroom different from using traditional classroom furniture?
Well, I can speak to the middle level. I think one of the main differences is just how quickly students can change from activity to activity. For example, within one class period, we can go from independent learning to collaborative work to Socratic seminar, all within a 40-minute period. And that just really wasn't possible before this furniture. So the desks we have, they're different than these desks. I actually have desks, high tables, and a few benches. So it looks a little bit different than the elementary classrooms. But students, after a few weeks, are able to really learn how to move them around. They can be difficult at first. It does take a little bit of time. But after a couple weeks, they're able to transition very quickly, which definitely has helped to use different learning styles and methods within the classroom, all within a 40-minute period, which has been extremely beneficial, especially this year through COVID and for the rest of time.
I think space matters. Space matters. It matters how you feel when you enter a room and you enter a classroom. That really alters your state for the day. And I feel that these classrooms are developing minds where children are thinking of smart spots. This is a smart spot for me because I can do my best thinking here, or I can do my best learning. It creates a place where kids feel safe and they feel valued. And since they have voice, that's a very powerful thing. It builds trust. And I think that the traditional classrooms, it's one way and it's done that one way. But when kids have a voice, they have a say, it's very powerful. And they feel valued and they feel that you're listening to them and that they have a voice. And if they can be in touch with how they learn, where they need to learn it, they can achieve their goals in a very safe environment.
And how are you using the collaboration rooms? I think that's a huge luxury, such a great opportunity. But how are you using them on a day-to-day basis?
The
collaboration rooms.
That's Emily's a Prospect Hill. It's at Hutchinson, but I know Dr. Fitzgerald.
I would love to use those.
I know Emily totally wants to co-space.
I know there's.
But she wants to come over here.
There's school envy. I know, but.
They're used all the time. So sometimes it's a space where just an individual child just needs to go and have their own privacy and think time. Sometimes it's a couple of groups of students working around a table. Sometimes they're all working independently, but they just want to be near each other in case they have a question. I don't know if you noticed, but there was the interactive TV was also in there. Kids are able to Chromecast, so they might be working on a project together, and they all have their Chromebooks there, and one of them has the project up so everyone can see it, so they're collaborating together. So honestly, those spaces are used in a variety of different ways throughout the day. You'll notice in there, it's an amoeba-shaped kind of table with stools, but kids will drag in different kind of furniture based on what they need. Or you'll see them using the stool as the table, and they're sitting on the floor. So they really do find what works for them, and they use the space in a variety of ways that we can't even imagine. And every day is different.
So good. Steve, just quickly, you're in that transition phase, right? So, Steve's always had that non-traditional at the forefront, thinking about space, right? You use a little crunch of an area in different ways for the kids. And now, with the bond, we dedicated a specific space, and then you were working on designing what furniture should go in there. So would you talk about that a little bit?
Yep. So we pretty much had a glorified closet that leaked down into the hallway, and we made the best of it, right? We did what we needed to do, and the kids loved it, and we did what we had to do. It's really interesting right now living in the new space where we're so excited to see the furniture come in, and we're part of the whole design process. And seeing the whole list of different committees that were up there, I've been on all of them from the beginning. So it was kind of a nice little flashback in terms of what we've done here in Pelham over the years. Sure. You're the first person to say I'm not loud enough. So, so it's funny because right now we're living it where we have 2 research classes booked at the same time and we only have 1 research classroom. And the one room is that traditional setting where you have the desks aligned in 4 rows and you go 8 deep in the classroom. And we have a freshman class and a sophomore class. And literally we're in group me texting like, okay, we're swapping classes today. And then you get that, oh, are you kidding me? We have to go to that other classroom. And then every time we see each other in the hallway, they're like, come on, Beltagas, can we go back into that room, or DeBello's in that room, or whatever it is. And we reflect after every activity that we do. And one of the reflection points were, so what hasn't been enjoyable so far in this process, outside of your crazy teacher and the amount of work that I'm making you do? And I would say 80% of the students were saying the fact that I have to go into that other classroom, which was that traditional layout. So even though a lot of times people are thinking like, what are we talking about here? Furniture and space. Like, really? Isn't this about education? But at the end of the day, it's about the kids. It's about having the kids get excited, passionate about what it is that they want to learn more about. And something as simple as a classroom that has this innovative furniture, that's a tool for us as teachers to be able to use for the kids to get them to that next level. You walk in every day, it's a brand new day. It's a new excitement. Kids are walking in like, where'd Beltagas put the garbage can today? Like, the rooms are constantly morphing, like so many teachers mentioned, in terms of based on the instruction and what you're trying to get out of the students. So I know being part of the process, looking for that furniture, trying to figure out how we're going to lay it out. I can't wait till that container finally lands and we start unloading, because we've been talking about it for years, and really excited to get the process going with it.
Kara, now, thank you for being here too, because this is our representative from the library and the PF. Again, once again, thank you so much for the funds to redesign those libraries. One of the first, because we had the makerspace in that library, and the library is where the makerspace is, and now it's totally changed. And of course, we want to thank Mr. Johnson and his children for redesigning the makerspace as well upstairs in Salmonoy. But Kara, I mean, inherited now this new space, and thank facilities, of course, for painting it and dropping the ceiling as well and making it look beautiful. How has it been different for you?
Well, one of the greatest parts of the flexible furniture for the library is the flexible shelving. So when I was designing the library, I was able to move around all the shelves in a way that flows and is very user-friendly. So for example, in the center of the library, I have all the picture books, and they're in a horseshoe shape. And they're just arranged, by the last name alphabetically, and the A starts and it goes around the Z. So it's a nice flow. So what we want to do is we want to have the children find books independently. And I do like a scavenger hunt with them, where I have them give them call numbers and they go over to the shelves and they try to find it. And it's just a very easy flow. Last year when I was in the library, the stationary shelves were arranged like this. So it didn't flow as well, and they weren't sure where to go next. So I think the just being able to move around the furniture and see what makes it most accessible to the students works really well. There's a lot of great cozy little reading nooks in the library. So in some of the corners, we have benches and really small tables that are really low to the ground. And we have a lot of the wiggle stools throughout the library, and the kids absolutely love them. And those are also in the reading area where I would read to them. We have the mats on the floor. So we have some students on the floor on the mats. We have wiggle stools. And because we're distancing, we're also able to put students at the tables. And my tables are arranged in like a pinwheel formation. So it makes it easier because it's all in the central area to space the students out. Also, they take turns on the wiggle stools. One of the, I guess, the challenges is getting them to, use them correctly and not spin in circles, but they're getting really good at that. I teach the kindergarten and first graders. So it's a really nice space, and it's really cozy. And they find like a lot of places, some students like to lie down on the mats and read during book exchange time. Some like to go in the area where we have a little table in the center, which we call the diner table because it's surrounded by a bench. So there's a lot of very, fun places for them to read, and I think they feel very comfortable.
Thank you. And you alluded to it, but I also want to ask everyone else, what has been the student feedback? What have they said to you about your classrooms and how it makes them feel and what they're thinking about, I guess, their new learning space?
They love it. Most of the time they'll walk in, especially at the beginning of the year when they're first getting used to it, and they'll say things like, this reminds me of my living room, or this reminds me of home. And it's just like, it's very nice to hear coming from a middle school student that may be very stressed about tests and quizzes and homework. And they come in and they really are able to reflect upon the fact that they feel safe and comfortable. And what else can we want from our students than for them to feel safe and comfortable? So if our space is able to do that, that's absolutely the best thing. So they love it. They love the process of designing it. When we first asked them, what would you want to see? And then they came back and started to see the different things that they suggested. And we're like, why weren't we here when this came in? But that's a different story. But it really definitely is something that they feel came from their own voice, which is neat as well.
We just recently had an opportunity where in senior year, we write a lot, and the students are writing 20-page research papers. And we had a whole writing workshop kind of a thing and experience. And we have carpet in our classroom, which is amazing. And also could be quite a challenge. But on the amazing part of it is kids are walking in there and we have like a writing workshop day. Kids are bringing their blankets and pillows and they're getting to their zone, even though the furniture is not there yet. And they're kind of snuggling up and they're just cranking out work for hours. And then just to see that level of excitement around reading and writing, which normally we see when we're doing PowerPoint presentations, poster board presentations, was really impressive. And I think, again, that space and that vibe that it creates just elevates the experience for the kids.
So this wasn't student feedback, but it's just an observation that I made today when I was at Siwanoy. And from you asking this question, I just kind of put the pieces together that the students are kind of so comfortable with the furniture in their classroom that I was teaching a lesson, they were using their Chromebooks, and it was time for them to work independently. And they kind of just got up and went to a standing table and kind of just made the decision on their own. So I think they've gotten to a point now where they're so comfortable with the furniture that they're able to make a decision on their own as a learner to say, yeah, I need to stand up for a second and I'm going to go to the standing desk and I'm going to have my Chromebook open there instead of at my desk. So I think that was a nice observation that I made today.
I was just going to say, I've had a lot of conversations with the kids about why they choose a spot. And you can see some of my kiddos up there and they'll be able to say, well, I'm writing, I need to be at a flat surface, but I also want to be standing. And then another child will say, I do want to go over to a standing desk. And just for them to be able to say, I'm here because I can concentrate better. I'm here because I can do my best work here. I think is very powerful for kids to be able to know that and to name why.
I love the flexibility, but I was hearing both of you say about kids finding a spot where they're most comfortable. And it was reminding me of those medicine ball chairs that we had. I think I was maybe like 6 years ago. We got you had to sign the permission slip that said your kid wouldn't pop a hole in it, but the whole notion was that maybe your kid needed to bounce a little bit, but that was one chair in the whole classroom and you got it for like a week or something, right? And what about all the other kids who didn't get that? And now in these classrooms, on any given moment or depending on how you walk into the day feeling, you can adjust, where you're learning and how you're learning and how much you need to move or sit still. So it's pretty amazing when you look at those pictures of progress, like there's another example of it,
Well, what's interesting too is that, again, this is things we didn't anticipate with the pandemic, right? We had no idea, but I'm assuming, and probably not as dangerous to do, is the kids, for how many months were working in their homes. And how they're propped up in different ways in their bed, on couches, it wasn't always at a table. And then they come back to school and they're back in this hard desk that doesn't move.
Yeah.
But for some other students, especially the ones here, but in some of your classrooms, as Mr. Balteka said, they're trying to bring those elements into the classroom, right? So that they feel more safe or comfortable because that's what they were doing at home, right? So, we want to talk about resiliency, and we also want the kids to, come back and, begin learning again in really a traditional way. But the thing is that their lives have changed, where they've learned and where they've been for the past 20 months. And I'm wondering, and I don't know the answers to this, but it's just something that I wonder whether the kids who have this type of furniture, which is a little bit more flexible for them, whether it's making them more, just comfortable in that coming back to school, knowing that it's not, the sturdy, traditional, immovable desk. That's just a wondering. I don't have an answer to that.
Steve?
Please.
I can't help but notice how just the configurations and the furniture supports all of the program modifications that we talk about for the students with IEPs and Section 504 plans. I had meetings today, and I'm just looking at the ways you would do preferential seating near instruction and movement breaks, and without the students looking different and being able to get out of their seat and participate for the kids with sensory or attention issues. So this is really terrific to see. Thanks.
I think a similar point, Rosemary, and it's not exactly the same, but I've seen, the other day, I was walking around the building, the high school building. We have room 224, which I went and I asked Steve if he had a little extra money. And I said, listen, can we put something in the math classrooms? And I asked a couple times and he finally gave in. And we got some writable surfaces in 224. And I was in there for Academy the other day, and the students were on the circular desks where you can write on top, right? And they were literally doing math problems in Academy, and they were so excited about doing the math problems. I was just because they were doing it on the writable surfaces. And it's just the fact that they would be driven to come in there and do a little extra math work on a writable surface was a really, really cool thing to see. So there are these kind of intangibles that you can't really quantify that are going on in some of these classrooms. And, more math teachers want to do some, station-based learning in their classrooms because of 224. So we're actually, we've already gotten requests to remodel math classrooms in the high school to get more of that kind of furniture. So that's really, really exciting to see. And just to pick up on Steve's point, people know him for being the science research teacher, but he's also the engineering teacher this year. And so if you walk into his classroom, he has to reconfigure that space for the engineering kids. And we were on a learning walk a few weeks ago, and to see the kids all over the place in the different configurations doing engineering projects, to the point that pretty much everybody said tonight, we're not really just delivering content anymore. We're trying to teach students how to use their skills to be problem solvers and critical thinkers, which in the past we used to say we did, and then we would hand out study guides and tell people to, answer questions on a test. Now we're asking them to design and build things and to reflect on what they've designed and built. And in order to do that, sometimes your furniture has to cooperate with you. So that's a large part of the work that we've been doing. And I saw that in the engineering class I was in, and I saw that in Raquel Rodriguez's academy when she was giving extra help in math to her students.
On that point as well, students are learning how to advocate for themselves in ways that they never have before. So students that may have felt uncomfortable asking to learn in a different way or sit in a different place are now asking up front, in front of everyone, I need the wiggle chair, or just walk over to where they can stand up. So it's really nice just seeing every student being able to not only understand the way that they learn best, but also advocating for it, which is something we really are always encouraging at the middle level and probably at every level. And we're seeing it more and more with this furniture.
Something else that I'm noticing here at Hutchinson that kind of goes off that point as well. The space that you saw upstairs right outside, right near the elevators where there was a few different tables and some stools, that spot is pretty active all day long. So students from grades 3, 4, and 5 are choosing to go outside and work, or maybe they're being sent outside to go and work, but it's almost preparing them a little bit more for the middle school to say, okay, I'm able to choose where I'm going to work. This is what works for me as a learner. So I think it's nice that they have that option.
I know we want to kind of wind down a little bit. I have one particular question to ask is, what challenges do you still face, even though you have this furniture? What are some roadblocks or maybe some dilemmas you still have?
I think part of it comes with the technology setup. I think we have this classroom where it's really student-centered, but the smart board's still in the front of the room. So I'd say that's probably the only challenge, and it's something that the students adjust to very easily. So it's not a huge challenge. But I would say that's probably the only thing that still feels like there's a front of the room at this point.
I would say another challenge is, and I've seen it in other classrooms and just over the years of trying to move things around, is that organized chaos and mess. It's difficult. And you kind of see that, and you're living in that space, right? And you got kids, and you have kids rotating through that classroom all day long. So being able to adjust things and then reset things and things that are on wheels and things that are movable, you can't be so confined to, okay, it's got to be aligned perfectly in this fashion. So you got to kind of let go a little bit with that.
It does seem to me like it's maybe a lot of work for the teacher to have to be moving the desks around.
It is. The nice thing is, while we work through this process and trying to vet the different companies, they did a really nice job going with the company that we did and the furniture that we did, that the students are able to help move it. So it's really the teacher's responsibility, I guess, to put that ownership on the students. Like, you have to maintain this space. This is our space. This is not you walk in and we're treating it just as a public space that we don't care about. It's ours. And there's that sense of responsibility where we do things and we maintain it together. So the nice thing is, like, even as simple on these chairs where there's that little hole that you could kind of grab that chair and move it around, be responsible together as a class at the end of the day. Let's reset everything. But it does. A lot falls back onto the teacher, and it takes that extra 15, 20 minutes a day, even. And it doesn't sound like much, but every day, 15, 20 minutes, just restructuring everything and reorganizing. It's a lot, but again, it's exciting. So I think a lot of the teachers buy into it.
It is exciting and it's worth it. And I think kids, when they think about, you think about a growth area and you think about it's important. Why do we need to work on this? And then as a collective, what changes can we agree to make? I know Maya Angelou said, she said, every person needs a place that is furnished with hope. And this building definitely has that. And I feel so many of our classrooms in Pelham are working in that direction. And I think it's important for our children that maybe it can be a lot of work, for the teachers, as you say, but as the kids take more ownership, it's very well worth it. We're preparing them for their futures as learners, as emotionally ready people for their lives. And so it's really very, very well worth it.
Dr. Garcia, for the last 5 years, I've been given a lot of awesome books and been hearing about your vision. This is obviously executed in a big way in this building. But what do you see as being sort of the next steps? We did the common libraries with the PEF grant, but there's many more classrooms across the district.
Yeah, I think the next step is really coming up with a systematic plan for the rest of the district, right? And it does look a little different at the secondary level. It's going to be slower for a lot of reasons. I think one of it is, last year we told everyone to separate, and the traditional desk made it easier. At the high school, in fact, we had to sort of put these desks in some places on hold, and then go back to some old traditional desks just to keep the kids separated. So, it is kind of schizophrenic a little bit to say, okay, now let's get back together. But that's where we're going to lead to, right? And I think it's just sitting down as a district and also, with the administrators to say, okay, what is our next 3 to 5 years? If we're looking at how do we change our other classrooms, how are we going to do that financially, right? And how are we going to do that systemically? Because, if I was a parent in another school, right, I'd be like, well, what about my classroom? And I think that's sort of like the next step of trying to kind of cost it out. It is literally about $20,000 at the elementary level, maybe about $25,000 at the secondary level per classroom. So it is expensive. And I think it also, when the PEF grant was written, it took 2 tries really. And it wasn't because of, I think the great apprehension on the PEF's part. It was, they really wanted to make sure that we knew what we're doing and what's coming next. Yeah. Like Hutchinson was kind of easy because we knew that was coming next. And, part of the plan was to kind of build those classrooms to influence this. It reversed, but I think that's why we moved to also looking at the library spaces, because we call them universal learning commons, right? And as Kara mentioned, right, I mean, most libraries you walk into, it's not very friendly per se, right? It's very, old traditional, everything's immovable. It's hard to get, especially elementary students, interested. But you're able to create different, every time you go in there or every day, you can create a different zone for children that makes it a little bit more exciting to learn. So I think, we want to kind of see that in place in the other classrooms. It's kind of like, how do we get there now? And I think that because, the pandemic made it difficult, I think it's a mindset, right? I think it's making sure that we invite more teachers to even attend some of the learning sessions, which are being run at Hutchinson School, so that they can go back to their schools and think about, okay, what do I need to do now? And then as a district, just systemically trying to figure out how we're going to roll this into the kindergarten classrooms and the first grade classrooms and so forth and so on. And the secondary classes, and not everyone's ready for it, right? And also it doesn't necessarily fit everywhere.
Right.
And I think that's, the next thought process. We've gotten past this point. I haven't gotten past the pandemic, but we've gotten through this part of the pandemic where teachers are now comfortable a little bit more having kids work together. That wasn't really in place last year. So, it's kind of getting that comfort level back with everyone. And, at Hutchinson, it's trial by fire because it's here. But I think that they're not even thinking about that piece, right? That it's really not as much of a concern because they see what this really means, right? And how the kids are learning, differently in that sense. So I think, again, systemically, financially, how we should plan that out over the next 3 to 5 years is important.
It'd be interesting as we do get to a more stable, God willing, place of working and collaborating more closely, that to hear from the teachers, to hear what they want. They see something in action here. And is that something that could be useful from a teacher's perspective?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And one of the questions we're going to get to was like, what do you think you would, share with your colleagues, or what do you think you can, what type of advice would you give your colleagues that don't have the furniture, right? That's just, those are conversations that I think we need to have as well.
Yeah.
So I as an architect, I walk around this building and I try to understand sort of what the essence of the spaces are that make them different. And because in fact, there's a bunch of rectangular rooms, which are no different than the rectangular rooms at every other school. Well, there is one difference. There's one difference. These rooms are more square. Most classrooms are more rectangular. And that's a big difference because it allows you to have more flexibility in how you take this movable furniture and move it around, right? So, but as a board member, how do you scale this up, right? And if you start with the premise that they're all rectangular envelopes, the rectangular vessels, containers, then you have to wonder, what is it that's actually creating the quality that you guys have all been describing and the improvements and the interactions. And I venture to say that it's has as much to do with the furniture or as much to do with the teacher as the furniture.
Absolutely.
Right? Because, you could take big old wood rectangular tables and move them around every day, right? Now, they're not as funky in shape and they don't have wheels and stuff like that, but you could do that. It would be awkward, but you could do it, right? So it's really the mindset of the teacher. And maybe it's the furniture that says to them, oh, look at all the possibilities, because it suggests dynamic quality. It suggests being moved. The furniture says, move me, right? And so maybe I'm trying to understand the chicken and egg thing.
No, you're right. I was about to say the chicken or the egg, right? And I think that's.
I don't think it's the furniture that makes it happen.
No, it always starts with the teacher.
Furniture facilitates it. And that's good news, actually, right? Yeah. Because if we start with the premise that all classrooms are basically rectangular, then, it's how you feel that vessel and how you create a different kind of mindset in the teachers to use that in a more dynamic way, which is really what we're talking about. The static rows of chairs versus that dynamic possibilities and exploring those possibilities. So, I mean, it's encouraging on the one hand, because we don't have to build all new schools in order to create these kinds of environments, right? Though the other schools will never have the advantage of collaborative spaces. They won't have the nooks in the hallways, that allow for that, individualization of teaching and learning. But maybe there's ways of creating some of that variety in those other schools without investing in a wholesale reconstruction.
Yeah, and I think that, it's sort of like visiting, there's the learning garden, right? The outdoor learning space at Illinois, right? I know some teachers and schools wanted to go visit that to kind of see whether it could be replicated in other places too, because they're intrigued by that concept. I think it's the same thing here, that we need to, as there's a different comfort level too, making sure that we bring more of the other teachers here from the other schools so they can see it, because they don't really, a lot of them don't know it. We do have some small classrooms, right, that have the furniture. But I think that maybe if they see it, they can kind of then be inspired by it, something about it. But you're right, you don't need it in your school for that. You still have the same rectangular space in your classroom. And what can we do with, that space in that classroom? But it always goes back to the teacher. Even, like I said, it's a tool, just like a laptop. So just like technology, it's still the teacher who's going to make it interactive. It's not necessarily the furniture itself, right? So that's something that's important.
When smart boards were invented.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, exactly.
Some of us remember when we first got them.
Everyone needed a smart board.
Well, the whole issue was how do you integrate that into teaching?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Dennis remembers too. And now, it's, we couldn't live without it, right? The teachers would say that, I presume.
Well, they're different now, right? So the smart boards became totally obsolete because of the design of it, and now we're back to basically interactive TV screens, right? Which is, if you think about it, we used to have TVs in our classrooms 30 years ago, but it's kind of, they look different, yes, but it took the best of both worlds. It's projected in a different way. It's just a screen, but you can touch it. It's basically like a surface. But again, that's not, unless the teacher knows how to use the tool, and whether it becomes more of a collaborative space or a collaborative piece, and it's not just teacher-centered all the time. As you said, it's in the center of your classroom. So it does dictate where the classroom is directed, right? But in Steve's Science Research Room, it could be then stations where kids have displays, which is different than what we see. It's more interactive, but yes, always goes back to the teacher no matter what it is.
I think one of the core elements when you begin to look at the space, and I think I probably could have spoke about it a little bit more, is that the core of everything that we do here is always instruction. Even as a director of tech, everyone thinks of myself as being, a technology guru, which I do take a lot of pride in my instructional technology. It always goes back to my core, which is good instruction, because you're never going to replace that. These things are just tools, and everything is just to help enhance the teaching and learning of what you're trying to do. But core instruction is core instruction. And that's why you'll never be able to ever replace what a good teacher can do in a classroom, because you need that core instruction. And that's the center of what we do. And I think when you start to go through and take a deeper dive on the space, and if you look at the first quote that's even on the cover, it's not about decorating a learning space. It's about designing them to amplify learning. Learning is the center of what they're doing within these spaces. It's not the stuff that's in it. It's the learning.
Sorry, I know it's very late, but I just wanted to say one thing, because I was thinking about what Rosemary said and Steve's chart about the history of the factories, and what Jess was saying about the chair that you had to sign up for. And so 18 years ago, I had a first grader who couldn't stay, and he couldn't sit in his chair. And he had an amazing teacher, like many of the teachers in Pelham, who was aware of his development, didn't think anything of it, and accommodated him. But it was uncomfortable because the chair was hard and it wasn't designed for a kid who couldn't sit still. We've made an enormous amount of progress since then. The teachers are still amazing and aware of child development, but the children here are more comfortable in their space. And to Rosemary's point, that kid doesn't stand out anymore. He's able to fit in the classroom comfortably with his peers, and anyone else can use the same chair. So, thank you.
Well, I just think that, it took a while to get to this point, right? And understand it. But, it is, again, it goes back to what John said, the chicken or the egg concept. We can never make a false pretense that it's about, the technology is good. This is going to make learning better, right? You have to marry the math program, the literacy program with technology and to see how it facilitates learning, right? So it is a blending of really trying to understand the best practices, kind of put it all together. So again, it's just the outset of the journey, right? We do have this school, of course, but we still have a long way to go. Even if you're in this school, teachers still have a journey for that. But I think we're in a better place now than, let's say, we were 20 months ago.
Thank you so much for all the time that you put into this and for all the administrators and teachers for joining us. It's really late, end of a long day for everybody. So thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Madam President, would you entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Do I have a second? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a good night. Thank you.